Changing a neckline can totally change the look of a dress. When I first made this dress, this is how it looked, but it's so easy to transform it. I'm Ali and I've been making and altering clothes for as long as I can remember, and changing necklines is something I have done so many times for me and for clients. So if you've got a dress that you love but you fancy something new, something a bit different, then how about changing it? So this tutorial will work with something that you've made yourself, something from a factory. It's going to be made in the same kind of way. So as long as your dress has a lining or a facing and not a binding or that kind of trim, then this is going to work. And you don't have to turn it into a V, you can turn it into whatever shape you want. So this tutorial will show you what to do a step at a time. It will show you what to unpick before you get started, and when you turn it inside out, what to do, how to find the center point, what to stitch, and then how to finish it off and get it back to a nice finished neckline again. So what I would recommend is going down a little bit at a time. If you're going from the high neck I had to this, you'll see when I do this, I do it a step at a time. I don't just take it all the way down because you don't want to regret it. And you don't want to make it too gapey. You just don't know how the fabric is going to react when it's cut down. You might need to add some kind of trim on the inside. You might need to do different things. So just do it a little bit at a time. I tried this on a few times before I got it to exactly where I wanted it. So let's go back to how this looked at the beginning and I'll show you step by step how I turned it into this. So let's think about what we need to do to change this into a V. What I don't want to do is ruin a perfectly nice dress. I still really like this dress. I just fancy changing it so it's a different look this year when I wear it. I'm going to lower it a little bit. I'm not going to take it any wider because it's already quite wide, but I want it to go down to a V. And I want it to go fairly low, but what I don't want to do is cut it down so much that it ends up gaping. I know it's going to slip off the shoulders. It's already quite low at the back, so I can put little ribbons on the shoulders to hold it up. But I just want to make sure I don't ruin it by it just opening up and gaping. You can put a little dart in it or do a very slight gather to close in a neckline that's gaping, but it's not ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it down a little bit at a time. So this dress has a lining, and how I'm doing this is going to work for any dress with a lining or a facing. If you have a facing that doesn't go down far enough for how low you want to take your neck, you can always just extend it. You can sew another bit of fabric on it and extend that facing. If you've got something that's got a binding or a trim, then it might be made slightly different to this. But if you've got a dress that's got a clean finished neck like this, then chances are it's going to have a lining or a facing with some understitching, exactly how this is made. And by the way, I do have a video on making this exact dress, so if you like the look of it and you want to make something similar, if you've not made anything out of lace, click the link above or in the description and it will take you through to the video of me making this dress. So another thing you need to think about, if you have a neck like this, it might not have too much structure. Whereas if you are opening it up and doing a V, going a bit lower, you might just need a bit more structure to it. It really depends what kind of fabric you've got. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo all the understitching. You'll see that in a second. And I'm going to go all the way up to the shoulders and just past it so I can really shape this. And also I want to find exactly where the centre front is. So I'm not going to do that on, I'm going to do all of this on the table, but I just wanted to explain before I get started what I'm going to do. So I need to find that centre point. I need to know roughly how low I want to take it. So I am going to put a pin in it while it's on me to do that. And I need to get rid of the understitching so that I can turn it around nice and easily. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. While it's on, all I'm going to do this in a mirror. I'm going to get this safety pin and I'm just going to mark it to kind of ideally where I want to go down to. But I am going to go down a little bit at a time just so I can keep trying it on, because what I don't want to do is suddenly try it on, it's gone too low and then I've absolutely ruined it. I imagine it was hard to see it when I had it on, but this is where my pin is. So if I lay my dress out, that's the shoulder seam. It's kind of hard to see in this colour, but that's where my shoulder seam is. That's roughly where I want it to go down to. This is not the centre, this is just roughly the height. And so I just want to create a V-neck there. But the first thing I need to do is I need to unpick all of this understitching. So I just literally need to go the whole way round, just unpicking all of this. I'm going to get this now unpicked all the way around the front, and I'm going to go to just past where the shoulder seam is. I want to sew all the way up to the seam, so I just need to unpick to just past it. If I show you, just to here, and that will allow me to reshape the neck all the way up to that shoulder. So I've got all that unpicked, so now I can start to work out where I want to lower this to. So first thing I'm going to do is take this measurement here. So 10 centimeters is how much lower I want this to go. So I need to get to the inside of this. Now this is the lining that you can see through the lace, and then that's the inner lining. And I need to find where the center front is, because I don't want to do a V and it not be in the center. So let's zoom out a little bit. And the best way of finding the center on this one, it all depends on what you've got. If you've got darts, you can do it to that. If you've got a princess seam like me, all I'm going to do is measure from one side where it hits the armhole, measure to the other side, and I'm going to center that, and then just half that measurement to find the center point on my front. And I'm going to do that in a couple of places, because obviously I don't know how low I am going. So now what I can do is I can go between those two. I know that's going to be the centre as well. So this is where my centre is. And I worked out I want to go roughly 10 centimetres down. I want to make sure that that is not sticking up. So where it's been pressed, it's making this lining kind of naturally bunch up. So I'm just going to put a pin in there. I'm going to put a few around the top, just making sure that doesn't go up. So when I lay it down now, it's going to sit flat. So I can put these pins through all the layers, and then I just want to flip it over and make sure it's sitting nice and straight there, which it's not. So that's the whole point of checking. So I just need to unpin that one, and I'm just, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just flipping that out on the back, and that's now much better. What I'm going to do, as I said before, I'm going to take it down a little bit at a time. So I am thinking it's going to be around 10 centimetres, which takes me to there. But I'm not going to risk going all the way down to 10 centimetres. So I'm going to go just a little bit above, and then I can always bring it down a bit further. So I'm going by this pin here, and I want it to go to exactly the halfway point. So I'm going to just double check by doing it where these seams are, and it's off very slightly. So I'm just going to adjust that pin to go there. And then what I need to do is I need to go from this point here, and I just want to make sure that this is completely even. It's going to be really noticeable when it's on if it's not. So this is the beginnings of my V. I know it looks a bit complicated there, but I want to keep this one in for the how low it's going, and I want to keep that one in for the centre front. So this is the V that I'm following, and then I need to just reshape that right up to where that shoulder seam is. And what I want to make sure I do is I need to make sure, now this is turned inside out, all of my strap is here. If you go to this side, you can see it a bit more because it's a bit see-through. You can see all of that on the inside. I don't want to get that caught as I sew it. That is not gonna be good. So I need to just make sure I pull it out of the way as I pin it all the way up to the shoulder. And I just need to make sure that this stays a really nice line. So I'm going to pull that through a bit further because I want to go right up to where the shoulder seam is. You don't have to go all the way to it, but you want to go pretty much to where that shoulder seam is, just to keep the line nice. You don't want it to kind of jut out or anything where it hits that point. So I need to just play around with these pins now, just to make sure this is a really nice curve. Or if you're going lower, it might be more straight, but that looks like a decent shape to me. And then if I want to go lower, I can just follow that round. So now I just need to do what I've done on that side, on this side. So initially I'm going to do this by eye. I'm just going to get these in quite rough to start with. And I need to make sure nothing's caught on the back. So you can see that's a little bit caught there. So I just need to redo that one. And that now looks a lot better. There's a lot of pins there, so it's why it's kind of puckering a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just make sure this is symmetrical. So I want to lay my ruler kind of parallel to where that is. So if I measure from there to there, it's 6.5 centimetres. So I want it to hit 13 here. And actually by eye, I've done that pretty well. So I'm just going to check it in a couple of places. So we've got 3.5 there. It's kind of good to go up or down to get to a bit where it's kind of a whole or a half number rather than the odd millimetre. And so I've got 3.5 from there to there. So I want this to be 7. Actually, it's a lot more. So I've obviously scooped it out more. So I'm just going to change that pin to go there. And I'm just going to play around with this until I know that this is completely symmetrical. So let's just turn it that way again. And you just need to kind of keep jiggling it around. So I'm just moving the top side of that and keeping that bit the same. That's where I know it's correct. And then I can take another measurement up here. So this side is 2.25, and at about the same point here, it's actually 1.5, which is a lot of difference. So I prefer this side here. So what I'm going to do, so we'll go to more of a whole number. So we've got 2.5 centimetres, and that is positioned 6.5 from the centre front. So if I go 6.5 from the centre front on this side, I know at that point it's got to be 2.5 centimetres. And actually it's not too far off. I must have just measured in a different place. But I know that that needs to go there. So I need to rejig the other pins accordingly. And this really is just a case of just keep moving these around. You can do a template if you want, but you don't really need to do that. A lot of this you can just do by eye until you get that shape right. And that now looks a lot better. So I'm going to take all of these ones out. And this is where I'm going to sew. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew exactly where these pins are. And now that that's sewn up, it's a lot easier to see. So my line isn't perfect. It's a little bit wiggly on this side, but that's all stuff I can correct. But what I want to do now is, because it's a lot easier without the pins, is just fold this. And I'm going to position my shoulder seams together. And I'm going to fold along there. And then I'm just going to pin that together. And I know that this point here that I sewed down to is the centre, because I'd already figured that out. And what I can do now that that's done, if I line that up at the top, obviously make sure where the seam is lines up, not just the seam allowance, in case you've trimmed one side slightly more than the other, or if it's a factory made dress, obviously you're just trusting what they have done. So all I'm doing is putting a few pins through here, and then I can see if it matches the other side. So it matches spot on here, and it's slightly off here, so it goes slightly down on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a pin slightly down on this side to match it up, and then I can do exactly the same up here as well. And you can see that that matches pretty well on the other side. So those points are fine. I'm going to take all of those out. That point there is fine. It's just this bit here that needs a slight adjustment to make that perfectly symmetrical. And I said at the beginning it looks a little bit wiggly, and that is obviously why. So all I need to do is just restitch this bit to meet up at the bottom here, go through that point, and then join back onto the line here where it's okay. And there we go. That is now ready for me to see if I like it. So this is the point where you really want to make sure that it's all exactly how you want it. Make sure you've got nothing caught up. Make sure your straps that are within the layers here aren't caught up. You can always turn it the right way around to check, but you're going to struggle to turn it the right way around before you cut it. But you can see here if anything is caught. So I'm going to trim it from this side, because you can probably see a little bit better what's going on. And all I'm going to do, just make sure you've got it right before you cut this, because this is the point of no return, is I'm just cutting down to that bit there, because now I'm not going to cut these yet. I'm going to just leave them there for now, but I'm going to try it on and see if I like how that is. If I just turn it the right way around. There we go. You can see already it looks quite different. So I need to try it on now and check that I like the drop. I might want to go a little bit more, because I was kind of being a bit cautious with that. And I can see if I want to scoop it out a little bit more. I can check all of those things. So I'm going to just put this back on now and see how it looks. Before I put it on, what I'm going to do, just to make sure it stays in place nicely, is just put a few pins, because this is not finished. There's no understitching. It's not been trimmed. It is not going to sit in place. very well. So just by putting a few pins in there, it's just going to help it stay in place to try it on. So this is how it looks at the moment. So I was being cautious because I didn't want to go too far. And part of the reason is because I just didn't want to go too low and regret it. But the other part is I wanted to make sure this wasn't too gapey. So at the moment, this isn't gapey at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go quite a bit lower. I want this to look quite different to how it was before. So I'm going to redo it. I'm going to do another stitch line. I'll cut it down a bit more. And I will just keep doing that and trying it on. And I will keep doing it until I get it to how I want it to be. So all I need to do now is, I know that that is the centre. I need to work out how much lower I want to go, and I want to go at least down to there. But I don't mind if I try this on a couple of times to get it right. It's going to be worth it because it doesn't take many minutes to do this. So that is, I've just done that by eye, so that's a couple of centimetres. I'm going to follow the line up here, a couple of centimetres, and then all I need to do is just shape it back into there. I don't want to go all the way to the top anymore. I just want to go to this point here. I can hardly get my pin in. There we go. And I'm gonna just reshape down here. And it's amazing how different this is gonna look. So I just need to do this side exactly the same as this, and then I'll do like before. I'll stitch it, I'll cut it down to that point, and I'll try it on again and see how it looks. So you can see by the various rows of stitching that I've corrected it to make it symmetrical, I've lowered it, I've played around with it, but I'm now really happy with how that is. So the next stage I need to do, and make sure obviously you don't have anything caught up, is just to trim a lot of this off. So I'm still leaving a reasonable amount because I now need to think about what I can do with this to just give it a little bit of structure. And sometimes, rather than actually stitching a tape on, if you leave a fair bit of seam allowance, it kind of does the same job. So this, if I turn it that way, is relatively straight. So when I do my understitching and I have that folded like that, it's going to give it a fair bit of structure. So let's just turn it the right way around. And this is how it now looks on this side. So I can't see the seam allowance, but I can see also it's not affecting it. It's not making it sit badly, but it is going to be enough just to give it some structure from that side. If you look at the back, this is what I did on the back when I originally made it. You can add something stiffer if you want to, but I just don't like my clothes with a really stiff edge on them unless they really need to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it just trimmed like that. And I'm going to do as much understitching as I can to hold that in place. The only place where you might need to do something is, depending on what fabric you've got, if you go down to a V, it might make it a little bit weaker there. But my fabric seems to be structured enough to be able to leave it like that. As I said, I don't like adding too much to my necklines. And the reason for that is that when I wear them, when I move, I don't want this just kind of sitting really stiff. If you've got a neckline that needs that structure to stay in place, then that's fine. But other than that, I actually like my necklines to be nice and soft, just so they're comfortable. So what I need to do now is I need to try and get inside here to do the understitching to hold this in place. And it's always harder once something is already made. So my shoulder seam here, I don't think I'm going to be able to get all the way up there. So I'm going to have to just leave that, and I can always put some hand stitches in that to hold that in place. But what I'm doing is I'm going between the layers, and apologies if I knock my tripod. I'm pulling my lining to that side, and I'm gonna bring this up. I'm trying not to get my arms in the way, but it's kind of tricky. I want to get as high up into the strap as I can. And how high up you can get really depends on what shape you've got. If you've got really narrow straps, it gets harder. So I've got a fair way up with that. And all I'm going to do is do my understitching down to the bottom of the V. So my seam allowance, hopefully you can see it through there, is all on this side. Everything is facing this direction. And I'm going to stitch a couple of millimetres from that seam line down to the bottom, and I will go over that a couple of times. And if I just hold that there, you can see through the lining, so I've used quite a thin lining, you can see where the seam allowance is there. So I'm going to reinforce that, and then I will cut my thread, and I'll go back up the other side, up to the shoulder as well. So that's the last little bit of sewing I need to do, and then I can give this a good press, and I'm ready to try it on and see how it looks. And that's my understitching now done, which is going to help that stay in place. And as I said, I couldn't get right up to the shoulder because I just simply can't get in there, but I can always do some hand stitching if I need to, just to hold that in place. So I'm just waiting for my iron to warm up now so I can give that a really good press, and that's ready to now try on and see how it looks. So here it is again. You obviously saw it at the beginning, but I always like to show at the end how it looks. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and you now know how to change your neckline if that's why you were watching it, or if you're just watching it for the future, this will come in handy at some point. So if you did enjoy it, make sure you like it, share it, subscribe to my channel, all of that. I upload new tutorials every week, and by you interacting with my videos, it helps me to grow my channel.